I mean, I had people that I knew through work or something. We worked together a few years ago, so it wasn't even a really close relationship. But I had a few people offer me their liver, which was insane. Yeah, like, people that, like I say, that I didn't have a really, really strong bond with, or we were friends and we worked together. But I think that's amazing. So you sort of see who's not who your real friends are at all, but you realize how much support you have around you.
Welcome to A Doctor's View with Dr. Polivios, a podcast discussing everyday topics in health, fitness, and mental well-being, as well as providing an insight into medical life and its challenges. Please note that all opinions of the host and guests should not replace advice from your own doctor. Now sit back and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, Happy New Year and welcome back to a new series of A Doctor's View. I know 2020 was a difficult year for everyone, and sadly this year hasn't gotten off to the best start either. Here in the UK, things have taken a turn for the worse, and my heart goes out to all my colleagues, healthcare and key workers who are facing a very difficult time again during this second or even third wave that we're at now. I'm not going to focus too much on COVID this season, as firstly, I think listeners need a bit of an escape from it, and listening to podcasts should be about doing just that. And secondly, I need a bit of an escape from it, and podcast helps me focus on something else outside of the hospital. Still, I'm going to be optimistic and say that we're going to get through this together, and life will return to normal. That said, I'm in a new studio setting, so apologies whilst I try to optimize the environment for recording. And this year, I have a number of new guests who will share their wonderful, inspirational stories, insights, and viewpoints on a number of different topics. And of course, there will be the odd opinionated solo episode from myself. To start this season, I thought it'd be a good idea to discuss organ donation. And organ donation is a topic that we don't really talk about very often at all, and it's one that's so incredibly important. The fact that we're actually able to perform this life-saving treatment is nothing short of a miracle. But what we can actually overlook at times is that for each celebration of a life being saved, there is very often a tragedy involved to allow an organ to be donated. And this can affect not only the family and friends of the deceased donor, but actually the recipient as well. So with that, we jump to an interview with Danny Hiles, who shares his story with us after receiving a liver transplant as a result of being diagnosed with Wilson's disease. Danny, thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's lovely to chat to someone again. It's been a very, very long time. If you're listening to the podcast regularly, it hasn't been a regular upload recently. So thank you very much for being here.
That's no problem. Thank you for inviting me on.
So this is going to be a slightly different topic to what I normally do, and going to be talking about organ donation, organ transplantation, and also certain rare diseases which you are obviously familiar with. And
yes,
so Wilson's disease, I know it's what you were diagnosed with, and when I think of Wilson's disease and I think back to med school days, I think of a few buzzwords. So it was liver, autosomal recessive, it was copper, and basically that was it from my side. It's one of those things where we didn't spend a lot of time learning about. So can you tell us what is Wilson's disease?
So Wilson's disease, from my understanding, is basically it's a genetic disease. So you have two people that are carriers generally. And obviously when they have a baby, that can then form, I don't know what the scientific terms are, but you can then pass it on to your children. Which happened to me with Wilson's disease. It's not something, it's a buildup of copper in your body. That's what it is. So your liver can't process the copper properly. And after a while, you get a buildup. So this is how it kind of affects everyone differently, because for some people, that buildup can happen in their teens. Some people it happens when they're 30. Some people it happens, younger, older. And with the build-up, it can also affect your brain. So you have like neurological effects as well. So it really varies from person to person, Wilson's, but that's the main aspect to it is the build-up of copper. And it just starts causing cirrhosis of the liver, really.
And what symptoms were you getting, or did you get any?
Yeah, I mean, for probably a year or two before my diagnosis, I was having regular tests because I was just really anemic, tired, I wasn't myself, and my parents could see that, just sleeping all the time, no enthusiasm for anything. And then sort of a couple of days before I was really put into hospital, I had massive water retention, turned jaundice, very jaundice. So they were the main sort of symptoms that you could really see. And then when it come to being diagnosed, they did the eye test. So with Wilson's disease patients, you get it's called Kaiser-Fleischer rings. You get a buildup of copper in the eyes, and they using a special microscope, they can see that. So that was one of the main tests that they did to diagnose me as such.
And how old were you when you were diagnosed?
14.
14. And how old are you now?
34.
34. Wow, it's been a long time living knowing you've had the condition. And I take it was something that you didn't know before you were 14 that this was something that you'd need to deal with in the future. I know some people know that their parents are carriers and know that they need to get tested for it and things like that. But with yourself, like many people, I believe, with Wilson's, it was just something that they found out later on in life. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I mean, they sort of asked, is there anyone in your family with a history of it? But Wilson's disease you're lucky to get a diagnosis 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So if someone in your family had it 60 years ago, there's, even longer, there's a very slim chance that they would have actually been diagnosed with Wilson's. They would have just been put down as having a liver disease. So to trace it back in your family is hard. So yeah, I don't think many people really know.
And it's one of those conditions where, because it's an autosomal recessive condition, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but it means that you have both parents must be carriers, and you then have a 1 in 4 chance of producing a child with Wilson's disease. So right. it makes for quite a rare disease, but one that is obviously very going to cause a lot of problems and will need treating with later on in life, and earlier rather than later on, actually, like as you say, in your teen years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the main thing with Wilson's disease, is getting that diagnosis. Because once you get the diagnosis, the treatment works generally really, really well. The reason I had to have my liver transplant was because I already had such bad scarring on the liver. And at that time, they said to me that these are the two choices. We can give you a liver transplant, which they were trying to push for, or they said I could take the medication. And at the time, I just wanted to try the medication, and it worked for a long time. Okay. And another reason that I actually had to have with the transplant was because I ended up having clots around the liver. The main artery became clotted and a few other things. But in terms of the medication, if people get that diagnosis and they get on the medication, there's a really good chance that you'll live, I hate to say it, but with quotation marks, a normal life.
Yeah. How long were you on the medication for before finally requiring the transplant? Sorry.
From the whole time, from 14 up to 30. I think I was 33 when I needed the transplant. So,
33. Wow. So it lasted, the medication helped for a very long time then.
Yeah, definitely. It works. When they took my liver out and they did the testing to see the copper levels, they said the copper levels were fine.
Wow.
So if I hadn't have had the other complications, then, I probably wouldn't have needed the transplant.
And so, as you're saying, if you are diagnosed early and you start getting put on the medication, you can go through, as you say, normal life as best as possible, definitely. And without requiring transplantation later in the future, unless obviously there's other things that happen. But you can pretty much. Yeah. Was it a tablet a day? Was it one every other day?
No, it was definitely So you get put on penicillamine, which is the main drug that mixes with the copper. And that was about, I think, 500 milligrams in the morning, 500 milligrams in the evening. A lot of people are put on zinc. I was on zinc for a while, but it just kept making me sick, so I asked to be taken off that. And then you get put on all sorts of drugs for the side effects. So I was on something for water retention, so a diuretic. I can't remember, pyridoxine maybe. I was on vitamin K because I was anemic. I was on a few different things at that time.
And how was your family's reaction to the diagnosis?
Well, I almost died, so it was a really scary time for everyone. The doctors told my mum because they couldn't work out what was wrong with me. My diagnosis came through a bit of luck, but at the time they said, look, if we don't know what it is in the next 2 or 3 days, that could be it.
Gosh, that's such a. I've heard similar stories before with Wilson's and with this timeline as well, and patients being on the brink of death before knowing.
It's amazing because I've spoke to so many people now about it, and some people, almost like me, were what they thought were living such a great life. They were doing sports, they were active, they were doing well at school, and then all of a sudden, just over that short period of time, that copper buildup just tips, and then that's when it becomes dangerous.
Yes, because obviously you went through 14 years of a normal life without knowing, then all of a sudden. And I mean, what was the time scale between symptoms starting and things getting really bad?
It was probably like a year, maybe a year and a half, something like that. But it was very slow to start. It was just I was tired, I was anemic, and that was it. And there just became that one day where there was that big tipping point. My stomach just gained loads and loads of water, and I was in agony, just complete agony. I remember my dad driving me to hospital. Every single bump in the car was just so painful. But,
And with a lot of these conditions, things like diabetes and other conditions that people can be born with and get diagnosed at quite an early age, I've seen patients react differently to them in their teen years and in their early 20s, and it can be quite difficult in terms of a treatment plan and getting someone to comply with treatments. A lot of patients can be in denial of it, or it affects they want to feel normal as best they can, especially at such a young age. How was it for you at the time?
Yeah, I remember I must have had some sort of issues around it, because I remember someone just saying to me, look, people take vitamins every single day just through choice. They're like, it's really not a hard thing to take some tablets. And they also said, look, it could be worse, into the fact you could have to inject yourself every single day. You could have, there's so many other things that people have to have done, that taking some tablets really is, you've drawn lucky if that's all you've got to do.
It's a good explanation, actually. I haven't heard the vitamin one, but actually when you say it, it does.
Yeah, people do it, taking some tablets, and then after you do it for a while, it just becomes second nature.
Sure.
Routine.
And then tipping point again later on in life where you required the liver transplant. Obviously, knowing that you had Wilson's disease, things was being more closely monitored on a regular basis. So, did the transplant come as a shock to the system, as it were, or was that knowing over time that it would be something that was needed?
I obviously knew that it was coming at some point, but I didn't know there was no. I was going to King's College in London once a year for the checkups. The year before, there was no real sort of indication of them wanting to do a transplant. And then I went up for my yearly tests and things, and they sat me down and they said, look, this is the time we want to give you a transplant. So it did come out of the blue. It was a shock. And I listened to your podcast earlier about, Operation Day, explaining Operation Day to people. And I would suggest anyone go and listen to that that's having an operation, because you get told all this stuff before, but your head is in such a mess. It's like in films when they give you bad news, you get that sort of high pitched, just everything's sort of piling onto you. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, the number of what brought me to make that episode was just the number of questions I was getting from patients, and I thought these are all the same questions. Actually, for all these different people, and it was questions that I knew the majority of which had been answered before, but it's because it's such a brief and busy moment, especially if it's an operation where it's devastating news, or it's something that is very, very serious and is an urgent operation, rather than one that you've planned, say like to remove a benign mole, for example, or something like that. It's something that's going to really impact someone, and it's very difficult to take all these things in such a short space of time. And that's what led to that one. And you also had a lot of questions, I imagine, regarding the operation itself.
I'm not really one for asking questions.
Fair enough.
I've been around doctors now for so long that even when I was diagnosed, it was my mum that had all the questions. My parents. It's their job. You're good at your job. So if you say this is happening, then to me that's what's happening, and I have full trust. So I didn't really have many questions. It was like, okay, let's just do this. What you say goes.
It's something that you knew it needed to happen, so let's get on with it and get it done.
Yeah. I mean, I probably had the sort of standard questions, which they go through all anyway. It's like, how long's the recovery going to be?
Sure.
How long's the operation? But in terms of, big questions, I just thought, yeah, no, that's fine. Let's just do it.
Sure. And since the transplant, how have things been?
Really, really good.
Fantastic.
Really good. I've been really lucky. I was going, when you after the operation, as you probably know, you have sort of regular blood tests once a week. Then it goes down to 2 weeks and so on. But luckily, there's not been any blips in the road. My health's been good. I will say that there's two sides to a transplant. I'm presuming for a lot of people, you have the physical side to recover, and then you have the mental side to recover. So I've started some counselling recently, which again I would suggest to anyone to do that's been through it, because it's such a big thing to take on yourself. Physically I'm doing really well, and just taking the right steps mentally to keep in the right place.
Do you mind me asking, the mental side of things, what are the obstacles mentally that you have to overcome from a transplant perspective?
I think there's so many. There's the fact that you take so long out of your life to get it done. So you've got to catch up again. There's what he described as, what is it? Not remorse, but because you've had the operation, that obviously someone else has not been so fortunate. So you have that thought in your head of, although I'm doing all right, there's someone now that's not, their family, someone's gone. So you have that sort of, it's not guilt at all, but it plays in your head. There's quite a lot to it, really, I think.
I've met transplant recipients who have, and it's a rare thing, but have met their families of the donors.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've ever approached or thought about?
I started to write the letter, but in all honesty, it was just too emotional at the time. This is, there's another thing that I was like, right, I need to, just get some counselling, and I need to work through a few things, because it's hard to sit down and write that letter, I think. But yeah, I would definitely love to, if that was something that could happen in the future.
And do you know anything about the donor as well? Not to share with us, but details about
I know the age. He was 22, male. So obviously, when that year anniversary came around for me, it's a really good day. But in your head, or in my head, in the back, there was that thought of, okay, I'm celebrating today, but somewhere, especially for someone so young, they're not celebrating.
Yeah.
So you have that thought in your head. Well, I do, but you're still very grateful. And
of course. And the counselling side of things, does that focus things like CBT and things like that?
Cognitive. That's
behavior,
cognitive.
Yeah, cognitive behavior therapy. Does it focus on trying to make you approach the situation differently, or does it? It's not. What I'm trying to say is, it's not a case of you need to go on more tablets for this.
Oh no, definitely not. No, it's just a case of talking to someone. Just talking, and obviously getting out whatever emotions there might be, and things like that.
And again, these are quite personal questions, but just from very much an interest perspective, in terms of friendships and relationships and things like that. How is having an organ transplant, how does that affect things in that way? Because obviously it's something that a partner's going to find out about, I guess, and
Definitely not negative, I don't think.
Fantastic.
I haven't had any negative experiences from close friends, from friends and family. I mean, I had people that I knew through work or something. We worked together a few years ago, so it wasn't even a really close relationship, but I had a few people offer me their liver, which was insane. Yeah, like, people that, like I say, that I didn't have a really, really strong bond with, or, we were friends and we worked together, but I think that's amazing, so you sort of see who's not who your real friends are at all, but, you realize how much support you have around you.
That's pretty incredible, actually, to
Yeah, really incredible.
Wow.
And I've been really lucky to have family that were with me all the way through. So,
amazing.
Yeah, in terms of support. And then, like, I am single, but in terms of sort of dating and stuff, I don't think it really is a problem.
Yeah. You're obviously living a normal life to...
Yeah, if anything, people are just interested, so...
Yes. Yeah. And what medications do you take now? Because I understand the majority of patients that, if not, I'm not a transplant expert, but I can pretty much say pretty much all patients will be on some form of medication or another once the transplant's done.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I know exactly, but I would say probably every transplant patient has to take anti-rejection tablets.
Mm-hmm.
I know I do, and every other liver transplant patient. So that, because I'm explaining this for maybe your audience,
Sure.
not you, but because the organ is a foreign body, your immune system attacks it. So it tries to fight it off. So you have to take anti-rejection tablets, which lower your immune system. And that's why rejection is higher in younger people than older people, because the younger person has a higher immune system, so their body can fight it off more, whereas an old person's body sort of kind of accepts it a bit more. Yeah. But for me, all I'm taking now is 9 milligrams of Advograft and an aspirin.
Wow.
And that's it.
And that's every day?
Yeah, every morning. Three tablets of the Advograft and then one aspirin. So it's less than what I was taking when I was on with Wilson's, so it's great for me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's actually sounds like an easier regime in a way than the previous ones. And do you get many side effects with the medication?
I have the shakes occasionally. I get like hives, so like itchy sometimes, but that's not often. And for some people, if you do get itchy, you should speak to your doctors straight away, your GPs, because it can be a sign of the valves or the pump's not quite working, from what I understand, in the liver. But yeah, for me, it's just a little side effect. Shaking, get very hot sometimes, but it's such mild effects, really, for what I can do now.
Sure, so yeah. And it's obviously the initial diagnosis being at the age of 14, so it's about 20 years ago that this first happened in your life. What was the information about Wilson's like in terms of availability? Because I'm thinking back to when I was around that age, and which we're very similar ages, and internet was there, but it wasn't what it is now. So
I've still got all the stuff that my mum printed out, but it was terrible. It was like, it was some information on the guy that sort of found out about Wilson's. There wasn't anything about people's lives really that you could gauge what your life would be like. It was just the plain facts, the symptoms, the treatments, and that's it. And that's kind of why I set up my channel, my YouTube channel, was because it's just nice to be able to, if you do get that diagnosis, to be able to go and see other people that have had the same diagnosis and, hopefully see that they're doing all right. And
fantastic.
You can be like that.
I'll put a link to your channel in the podcast description, so anyone listening wants to gain more information and see you as well, that'll be fantastic for them to have a click. And
thank you.
There's obviously now there's things have changed so much with regards to mainly the internet. So I imagine there's plenty of support groups now and Facebook groups and all sorts, which I take it weren't available back then. I don't know if there was any in-person groups at the time?
I mean, I didn't really look for anything. It's only since I've had my transplant that I've talked about it a lot more. I didn't really talk about it at all before, to be honest. I kind of just had this thing of, because I was diagnosed at teenage years and then I was taken out of school. And, you're the kind of focus of the school at that point because you're not there and there's something wrong. And afterwards, I didn't want to, when I sort of went to college and university, I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want that to be what I was.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Didn't want it to
no one really
define
knew
you.
from school onwards. Yeah. And when I had to have my transplant, I told people, and some of my friends were like, geez, we didn't even know there was anything wrong with you. Like we didn't know you had this that you've been living with for however long.
Wow. That's the one thing about university is that it is a fresh start for everyone. You can be the person you always dreamt of being, as it were, and everyone's on a clean slate.
Yeah.
So, and obviously with it being 2020 and this year going the way it's been going, and recent times, COVID and lockdown's been just very hard for everyone. I take it's had quite an impact on yourself and other patients who have an immune deficiency, which is caused by the medication that you're taking.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely have to be, I would say, more cautious. Obviously, when it all come around, I think everyone was really scared because no one knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where you kind of had to get back out because if you didn't, you was just going to go insane. So for me, it's just about taking as many precautions as you can. So, wearing the mask, using hand sanitizer, trying not to touch stuff that you don't necessarily need to touch.
Sure.
Not going into places that you don't really need to go to. But still getting out and doing everything that you can because you've got to live.
You're in the category at the beginning, I imagine, of the 12-week high risk patient.
I had the fire brigade turn up at my house.
Oh, really?
Just to come and check if I was all right. Yeah.
I haven't heard. That's the first time I've heard of that. That's wow. And it
weird.
Was all everything's been a sort of an online virtual world, I imagine, for those 12 weeks, like most, but obviously in a slightly more extreme version for yourself and others.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky. I was living in the countryside at the time, so I was just going out for walks pretty much most days, and I was happy with that. And we've all got Netflix and Amazon and stuff like that, so
yeah, I think
it wasn't the worst time. It was just a confusing and worrying time, I think. But the fact that we all got to sit around for a bit is quite nice, really.
Yeah, I definitely think Netflix saved quite a few people during lockdown. So it definitely simply helped me at least. And so what are the plans for the channel and for future projects regarding Wilson's and other transplants patients?
Some of my videos are being used at one of the Wilson's conferences in London, in America soon. So that's really cool. They've taken like an excerpt from a few of, because I interview loads of different people. So they've taken excerpts from a few of those. And I'm just going to keep sort of interviewing people with interesting stories, really. The next one I've got lined up is a lady that's had a heart transplant. So It would be nice for me to compare how that is to a liver transplant, because all I've spoken to is liver transplant patients. So, it would just be interesting. I know I've been through like a liver transplant, but to me, it sort of seems like a fairly normal procedure. So when you look at someone that's had a lung transplant or a double lung transplant, that amazes me. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So it'll be just interesting. Yeah. So just to chat to interesting people really and get their story out there.
I definitely coming from experiencing that side when I started this podcast, and was wondering how the sort of direction it was going to go. It just one person's led to another and definitely I can say it's worth keep going. And I've seen your channel; it's fantastic. The people you're interviewing are very, just really interesting people as well, and they've got some great things to say and great topics as well. So yeah, definitely keep going.
Great, thank you.
No worries. Danny, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been lovely chatting to you, and
it's been really nice. Yeah, thank you ever so much for inviting me on. And like I say, I was listening to some of your podcasts earlier, and they're really good. So if anyone, I will make sure I plug it because there's some important information that people can sort of learn from, and it would just be handy for them, I think. So it's good. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, Danny.
Nice one.
That was Danny Hiles sharing his amazing story with us. Please do visit his YouTube and Instagram pages, and I'll put links in the podcast description. And that's it for this week. So please do stay safe, everyone. And as always, please look after yourself. And I'll join you again next time. I'm Dr. Bolivios. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to A Doctor's View. If you're enjoying the show, please don't forget to subscribe or follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcasting platform so you don't miss a future episode. If there are any topics you would like considered for the show, please get in touch via email at adoctorsview@gmail.com or visit adoctorsview.uk. And be sure to follow the show on Instagram at A Doctor's View for some behind-the-scenes posts. See you at the next episode.